This is the Biblical Unitarian Podcast.
Hello, YouTube, and welcome again to the Biblical Unitarian Podcast, the podcast that aims to start conversations about the oneness and unity of God and about the humanity of Jesus. My name is Dustin Smith. As always, I will be your host, and today we are going to be looking at God and Jesus Christ, two persons, and asking about their relationship. How does God relate to Jesus? Are they co-equal in rank, power, authority, and status? The New Testament is abundantly clear that God and Jesus are not co-equal. Rather, it says that God is greater than Jesus. Let's look at the evidence for the claim that God is greater than Jesus. Point number one, Jesus himself admitted that the Father is greater. Look at what Jesus himself says in John 14:28. You heard that I said to you, I go away and I will come to you. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced because I go to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. Very clear there, Jesus says the Father is greater than I. Without any sort of qualification, the Father is greater than Jesus. That's what Jesus himself taught. Elsewhere in the Gospel of John, we can see Jesus saying that he cannot do things, but only the Father can do them. John chapter 5, verse 19. Therefore Jesus answered and was saying to them, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, unless it is something he sees the Father doing. That's not someone who is co-equal to God. And then a few verses later, in chapter 5, verse 30, Jesus says, I can do nothing on my own initiative. Clearly, God is greater than Jesus, and that is something that Jesus himself taught. Point number two, Paul taught that God is greater than Jesus. And we have the additional fact that Paul is commenting on the status of Jesus after his resurrection, exaltation, and ascension. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, starting in verse 21, he tells the Corinthians, So then let no one boast in men, for all things belong to you, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, or the world, or life, or death, or things present, or things to come, all things belong to you, and you belong to Christ, and here it is, Christ belongs to God. That's 1 Corinthians 3, verses 21 through 23, where Paul creates this hierarchy. All things belong to the Corinthians belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God. And Paul can say that because Paul believes that God is greater than Jesus. Paul says this elsewhere in 1 Corinthians in chapter 11, verse 3, where he says, But I want you to understand that Christ is the head of every man, the husband is the head of his wife, and God is the head of Christ. There again, we have that hierarchy. God is at the top, Christ is in the number 2 position, and then we have the husband and the wife. But God is the head of Christ. And Paul can say this because God is greater than Jesus. And again, keep in mind that these statements refer to Jesus' status after his resurrection and exaltation. Point number 3. The rest of the New Testament agrees that God is greater than Jesus. Look at what we have here in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5, where it says, For there is one God and one mediator also between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. There, Jesus is the human being that is between God and humanity. We also see this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6, where it says, There is one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. There, the one God is defined as the Father who, singular pronoun, is over all, meaning he is over all persons and all things. Obviously, Jesus would be included in that. The Father is greater than Jesus. And again, these statements in 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 5 and Ephesians 4, 6 refer to Jesus' status after he was raised and highly exalted. So, based on the evidence we have observed thus far, here are 3 facts upon which we can all agree. Fact number 1, prior to the cross, God was greater than Jesus. We saw this out of the mouth of Jesus within the statements that we saw in the Gospel of John. Fact number 2, after the cross and ascension, God is still greater than Jesus. We saw this with Paul and the rest of the New Testament. Fact number 3, since God is greater than Jesus, then Christians need to seriously rethink any Christology that makes Jesus co-equal to or identified as God. And we can say these 3 things because, as we've demonstrated, God is greater than Jesus. Thanks so much for watching this clip from the Biblical Unitarian Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more episodes, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Search for the Biblical Unitarian Podcast, and you will get our weekly podcast. My name is Dustin Smith. Until next time, you folks, take care.